I'm Bob Savikanis. Welcome to our program in a nutshell. Today we have a very special guest in Matt Fisher. Matt is the general manager of the passenger service of the Reading and Northern Railroad. And if you haven't had a chance to take a ride on one of their amazing excursions, you need to do it. But anyway, we're here with Matt today to talk a little bit about the Reading and Northern Railroad and some of the great trips they have to offer, and I guess some upcoming ideas and things that may be happening with the railroad. Matt, welcome to our program today.
Thank you, Bob, for having me.
It's a pleasure having you here. I've been on a couple of the excursions through the Jim Thorpe area, through Reading, Port Clinton, and things like that. Tell us a little bit about the Reading and Northern and what it's like to experience those train excursions.
Sure. The Reading and Northern Railroad is primarily a freight railroad. It's a privately held railroad owned by Andy Muller Jr. And it's almost 40 years old at this point if you include Blue Mountain Reading days. It started out only 13 some miles between South Hamburg, Pennsylvania and Temple, Pennsylvania, just north of Reading. And by 1990, the Reading and Northern Railroad formed and it became a big railroad carrier for freight in the Schuylkill County area. And again, in the mid-1990s, it came up into the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre area, primarily for freight. The passenger operation was along with the freight for almost the entire existence of the railroad. And it too started from the Reading area to the Hamburg area at first. And Mr. Muller became very popular when he ran the bigger steam locomotives that are actually still running today on the railroad. Then by 2005, the Lehigh Gorge Scenic Railway was formed in Jim Thorpe. That was the main draw for the town, which is the county seat in Carbon County. And that has grown over the years where it's not just a small 70-minute ride into the Lehigh Gorge State Park and back into the town, but now there are things like bike trains that people can take their bikes. And then by about 5-10 years ago, we started service into Jim Thorpe for all-day trains from the Reading area. And we'll talk more about what plans are coming up for Pittston as well to go to Jim Thorpe. So right now, there's options that you can just take a very quick 70-minute trip or an all-day excursion and take in a town like Jim Thorpe. We also go to places like Tamaqua and Pottsville and Minersville and Tunkhannock the way it is right now. And in the last year alone, we had 250,000 people visit us and ride our railroad.
As I said, I started the program by just saying it's an amazing what the excursions are like. The equipment is just so fascinating. I mean, the Reading and Northern has such a great array of locomotives, steam locomotives, diesels, and everything else. I mean, could you tell us a little bit? I know one of the older steam locomotives was recently brought back online.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, and that is the T1 that's referred to. It's a wheel arrangement of 484, so it's a much bigger steam locomotive. It was built in the Reading shops in 1945. It was pieced together by other locomotives that the Reading had owned. And it was one of the last locomotives built, not only in Reading, but in the country. And it served only a short time in freight service for the Reading company until all those locomotives were sidelined, but the Reading had they understood that passenger and the general public, still there was something there and that the public wanted to ride. You're already in the automobile and the jet age. And in 1959, the Reading Company started what were called the Iron Horse Rambles. And the 2102, which is the steam engine's number, along with the 3 other ones that the Reading picked out, there were 4 total. One is here in Steamtown, the 2124. Those 4 locomotives did these Iron Horse Rambles from 1959 through the mid-1960s, and they were very successful. They went from the Philadelphia area through coal country up towards Williamsport. And long story short, Andy Muller was able to purchase the 2102 in the late 1980s. And he used in that line that I mentioned from Temple to South Hamburg, along with the sister steam locomotive, the 425. The 425, most people know, is a nice, beautiful dark blue color. And that is actually a passenger locomotive. It's smaller, it's geared differently. The 2102 could haul a 100 car coal train very easily. where the 425 would only handle like a 10-car passenger train. So they're much different, but we use both of them. We have excursions throughout the year. The 2102 went, it was over 5 years of overhaul with our people and our shops at our headquarters in Port Clinton, Pennsylvania. And we spent almost $2.4 million when you're all in for all the upgrades for the shop that we needed to do, all the payroll, all the overhead, all the parts that many of which had to also be outsourced that our people couldn't just deal with. So it was a long time coming and a lot of money spent, and we're doing rambles very similar to what the Reading did back in the 60s, where most of them this year, this past year in 2022, went from the Reading area to Jim Thorpe. We also had the 2102 in Schuylkill Haven for a special festival day. And we're looking to bring the 2102 not back just to Reading and Jim Thorpe, but also to the market up here in the Wyoming Valley.
So let's lead right into that.
Yes.
I'm hearing stories, rumors, things like that, that the 2102, as you just said, is going to be doing excursions out of the Pittston area, which is
Yes.
so close to us. Can you tell us a little bit, some details about what you expect that's going to look
Sure.
like?
On North Main Street in Pittston, many people are familiar where the Pittston yards are located on the Reading Northern Railroad. We are in the process of making that a passenger facility. Not just the freight trains that come and go on a daily basis. It's now going to be shared, just like Reading is in North Reading. The freight trains will share the same tracks as the passenger trains. The railroad is in great shape. The main line extends from Reading to Pittston, and it traverses through the entire Lehigh Gorge State Park, heading south through Mountaintop area. We call it the Penobscot Yard. There'll be an intermediate stop there at Penobscot. At Whitehaven, we'll have a stop to get people on and off the train, and the destination will be from Pittston to Jim Thorpe, and have about a 3.5-hour layover there to enjoy the town before heading back to Pittston and seeing that beautiful scenery along the way over the Lehigh Gorge State Park, 2 tunnels crossing the Lehigh River several times. There's several great vistas of the Wyoming Valley, one of which is called the Lookout. So we're really excited because usually we only come up here for special charter trips, and it's only 1 or 2 times a year, where we're going to start service Memorial Day weekend in 2023. And the 2102 you'll probably and most likely see on a couple of the trains powering not just diesel trains, but also the 2102 steam engine on some days. And you'll see that pretty much every weekend through late September. We might do some smaller 70-minute Santa trains as well later in the year towards December. So we're going to be using Pittston quite frequently here, and we're spending money up there to design that out and build as the progress and as demand warrants it. So hopefully it'll be very popular, like the Reading to Jim Thorpe part of our business. And the people will have the option, if they don't want to drive right into town to Jim Thorpe, they can get on the train up here. The Wyoming Valley is one of our biggest markets that we have, that of people that visit the town. And we're very excited to have it as an option where they can get on basically in their backyards to go to Jim Thorpe.
And that's almost an understatement, saying excited. I'm a rail fan, and for me, just to have that opportunity to think that I could drive 15, 20 minutes to Pittston from Lackawanna County, et cetera, and
Right.
get a train and ride it through the Wyoming Valley and through, as you said, Penobscot, mountain area, mountaintop and everything, and
Sure.
end up in Jim Thorpe. The thing that amazes me is the equipment, though, that you guys have, that the Reading and Northern has. I've seen some of the observation cars. Can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit about some of the equipment, like the
Sure.
parlor cars, things like that? Because, again, they are such fantastic pieces of history and railroading equipment.
Yeah, we have almost 50 pieces of equipment that are coaches. Many of them are what we call standard coaches, where they're at one time commuter cars that could hold anywhere from 70 to 80 people. Some of them are as old as 1917 and frequented the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western Railroad. They're called the Edison cars, where they were in commuter service in North Jersey, and Thomas Edison was one of the first engineers because they were electric, and he took them into Hoboken. We own 9 of those cars. We have several cars built by Bethlehem Steel for the Reading Railroad in the early 1930s, in the middle of the Depression, which is amazing that they were ever even built. We have about 8 of those cars. We have cars that we bought recently from an auction in the last year or two from the Iowa Pacific Railroad. And we got many cars that were on the Southern's trains, the Crescent, from Washington, D.C. to New Orleans, and on the City of New Orleans, which was a train that went from Chicago to New Orleans. And those we call our Crown Class because they have more plush, more comfortable seats, that they're not doing a commuter trip in Philly or New York. You're going, you know, 1/3 across the country. So we have those now in our fleet. And then the cars that you mentioned, we have several cars, observation cars, dome cars with a glass ceiling on top. We have cars that are Pullman cars. Many people still know the Pullman name, and that was the way to go across country, where they're very comfortable cars. We have a few of those in our fleet. And then we have other cars too that are designed like something right out of the 1950s era, where there's like a bar area and there is lounge, our lounge cars, lounges on both sides of the kitchen bar area. And we're doing a very good job. The mechanics, the paint and restoration folks, they do fantastic work. One of the cars is called the Ma Chunk car, and that one, the Ma Chunk lounge car, was put into service in 8 days, where we repainted it, we prepped it, we repainted it, we did interior work, we did electrical work, we did some carpentry work, and in 8 days we got into service, because it came to us from the auction in our busiest time of year in October. And the people that work on it are just fantastic, and we're working on all the fleet. Besides the 50-some coaches that we have the 3 steam locomotives. One's on display, static display in Reading. The blue one's the 425, the passenger type engine, and then the 2102 is the bigger black steam engine that we have. We have F units, which are streamlined type diesels, and we also have the rail diesel cars that people that grew up in, especially the Philadelphia area, remember quite vividly, running as far up as Pottsville in the Reading area and taking the RDC cars into Philadelphia. So we have a wide array of different equipment, and really, I don't know of anywhere else in the country that has that. If people are interested in that, there's just a lot of history in that alone.
What I find to be fascinating is just that concept of, you mentioned that October is your busy season, obviously fall foliage season, things like that.
Right.
Probably the Christmas trains, the holiday trains, things like that. But we're getting into like the winter and the spring months and things like that. But if someone was interested in doing a train excursion, do they have that availability in the winter and the spring?
Yeah, we do now.
Tell us a little bit about that.
For many years, we had a schedule that we started in Memorial Day and then we ended right after Christmas. And we've grown in just the last 8 years 200% with ridership. And a lot of that is due to seeing the demand that was in Jim Thorpe with the Lehigh Gorge Scenic Railway part of the business, and seeing how for many weekends from 2005 through 2010, if you had 300-400 riders a day, that was good. Now we see that sometimes on one train, and we might have 4 trains. Or in October, we had several thousand people in just one day that visited and rode the railroad in Jim Thorpe. So we saw we had to expand, not just deep, but we had to expand outward too, where we started running some weekdays. Now we're running every day, basically from Easter through early November, every day of the week in Jim Thorpe for the 70-minute Lehigh Gorge train. Last year we started for the first time every weekend through winter, and we're just coming off of a very successful holiday weekend with Martin Luther King Day, and we ran any holiday, national holiday like MLK Day, and we're seeing that people are coming from far and wide, not just local people but tourists. They're seeing that we're opened, and if they're staying at the resorts or they're staying locally, it's an attraction that they can count on that is open and something that they can do. So we're expanding not only just weekdays throughout most of the year, but every weekend throughout the year you can ride.
We've talked a lot of business. What got Matt Fisher wanting to work for the Reading and Northern Railroad or involved in just trains?
Yeah, it's always been a hobby of mine. Model trains, Lionel, O-Gauge. A couple people in my family like trains a lot, and it was one of those things that go out to different trade shows that specifically deal with trains and history, and going out and seeing the real things. And I remember very distinctly going down and riding behind the 2102 when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, and that's very important to me that you see that it's very affordable, the rides, no matter what you do, if you do a 70-minute train or an all-day train. And it's just wonderful to see that most families can partake in that. And I see that where that child that was interested in trains and history and anyone that wants to be entertained for the day and do something differently. I just see that in so many families and people that visit, and I think back to that, and I was very lucky to have people in my life, my dad and my grandfather and my cousin that would take me out to these different types of places. So.
Earlier when we started the show, you mentioned about the amazing trajectory of the rise in ridership of the passenger service and everything. How proud does that make you feel to know that you've been a part of making that happen and creating so many happy memories for so many families and people riding excursions over the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's very proud, and I really appreciate all the work that everyone has done around the railroad, not just in the passenger department, but the people that are the mechanics, the people that are the people that work on facilities and that are in the restoration and paint department, as I mentioned. But it's also the people in the other departments of the railroad, because we have to work and we have to be in sync with the freight side, because there's freight trains as much as there are passenger trains, and just to see everybody work together and that it's supported by the ownership of the Muller family, it's just wonderful. And just to see many people have been with the railroad since the beginning of the Temple to South Hamburg days, which is almost 40 years ago. And that says a lot for the Reading and Northern Company as well. There are a lot of people that have been working for Mr. Muller for that time. And it is like an extended family, and it's very proud to be part of something like that and to build it up.
Well, as a rail fan, I am thrilled about what's going to be happening. Having done some of the excursions, as I said earlier in the past, I mean, you guys do a fantastic job, great equipment, just a great opportunity for families to get out there and just enjoy a train ride, in addition to visiting different communities, towns, and everything like that. Matt, how do you feel about the railroad expansion?
I'm very happy to come up this way. I always liked coming up to the Scranton area and seeing Pittston. It really, the railroad spent in private money so much time, so much money into the railroad. People will be impressed by the ride. It will take less than 2 hours to get down there from Pittston to Jim Thorpe. And it's just going to be an exciting thing. I can't wait to be on the first train, have a grand opening on Memorial Day weekend. Well,
it's something for us to look forward to. I want to thank you, Matt Fisher, for being our guest today in a nutshell, and just spending some time with us and kind of reliving those Reading rambles and just learning a little bit about what's going to be coming in the near future, something to really look forward to.
Yep, a lot to come. Thanks, Bob.
I'm Bob Savikanos, and I'm going to encourage all of our viewers to check this out, because if you're a rail fan, there's going to be great opportunities to enjoy passenger excursion service from the Pittston area and many other opportunities to enjoy with the Reading and Northern Railroad. I'm Bob Savikanos. Thank you for tuning in a nutshell.